spiritual abuse, but what is not spiritual abuse? You actually spend some time contrasting that in the book too. You said, okay, this is spiritual abuse, but this is not spiritual abuse. We want to make sure that we clarify. We've said what it is, but let's also say what it's not.
Yeah, so there's two extremes out there. One extreme out there is the idea that, well, this whole spiritual abuse thing is a mirage. You should not, pastors are just doing the best they can. It's all part of our therapeutic culture. Let's stop talking about it. Okay, well, I think that's totally mistaken. And I talk about how it's real. It's a problem. We need to address it. There's also another extreme, though, out there, which just kind of calls everything abuse. So if I'm upset by anything, it's abuse. If you've offended me personally, it's abuse. And we have to reckon with the fact that that's also a real part of the scenario we're facing. And there's people that think if you point out sin, that's abuse. If you say something that bothers me, that's abuse. Well, I go through, as you noted in the book, through a number of things, and I want to make sure we know are not abuse. Not everything is abuse. And we want to make careful we just don't throw the label around haphazardly. One of the classic examples, as I indicated, is pointing out sin, both in an individual's life or in a culture, is not in and of itself abusive. Although I also point out the fact that lots of times spiritual abuse does take place precisely when a pastor or a church is dealing with someone's sin. They can be overly harsh, or, handle it in a way that's not gracious and kind like Jesus would. Not that different than a police officer often abuses their authority as a police officer and uses excessive force, actually when someone's committing a crime. Here's the thing, is that no one's suggesting there may not be a crime there, but excessive force can still be true, even if a crime was committed. And it's like that in the church. Someone can still really be sinful, and the church can be right to point it out, but wrong in the way they do it. And then I went through a number of other examples in the book of things that aren't abuse. And so we just have to be careful here. And that's why I wrote the book, trying to thread that needle. And yes, that's what it is, threading a needle where we can acknowledge both extremes and hopefully fall into neither side.
You mentioned that the book is much more than a diagnostic, but you've written it to help leaders understand the serious damages that spiritual abuse causes in the lives who've suffered under it. It's what you wrote in your introduction. Yeah. Have you found those spiritual leaders resistant to talking about this? I mean, I know some are like, hey, let's talk about this because they recognize it. They've experienced it. But have you experienced hesitancy from those in leadership about addressing it because they're afraid it's going to open them up?
Oh, yeah. There's defensiveness out there. And look, I get it. I'm a pastor too, right? I mean, one of the reasons I felt like I needed to write the book is because I think it needed to be written by somebody who is sort of seen, hopefully, by the main audience I'm trying to reach as with them. Like, I'm not against the church. I'm part of the church. I'm a pastor. I'm for you as pastors out there. But there is a defensive posture that I'm trying to break through, where people are like, well, I can't concede an inch here, because if I concede an inch, then the whole church is going to implode. Part of what I tried to do in the book, though, and you hinted at this, is to show the serious damage that spiritual abuse does to a congregant or congregants, and how hopefully that can be motivating for whoever read the book to realize, oh, wait, maybe this is really a bigger problem than we think. Sometimes the reaction we get from people is like, well, okay, so the pastor hurt some people in the church, it's a fallen world, get over it, kind of attitude. And I'm like, yeah, that's vastly oversimplified and really reckless in terms of one's understanding of the way abuse operates. So I wrote a whole chapter to show the damage that typically it causes. And hopefully that's a wake-up call. I hope it is.